This is Business Morning on Channels Television. Thank you for joining us. I am Bisi Adebayo. Crude oil benchmarks opened lower today as the Brent hits its lowest level since November 2002. And this follows the rising number of coronavirus pandemic cases across the globe and the Saudi Arabia-Russia price war, which shows no signs of abating. Brent futures were down 6.7% to $23.25 a barrel, while U.S. crude futures fell as far as $19.92, having traded down 5.4%. The oil markets have been hit by demand destruction caused by the coronavirus pandemic and the Saudi Arabia-Russia price war that is flooding markets with extra supply. Saudi Arabia said on Friday that it was not in talks with Russia to balance oil markets despite rising pressure from Washington to stop a price rout amid the coronavirus pandemic. Meantime, Nigeria's case of COVID-19 now stands at 111, and to curtail the spread of the virus, President Muhammadu Buhari has announced an initial 14-day restriction of movement of people in Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT from 11 p.m. today. Now, the president also directed that a 3-month repayment moratorium for all the social investment packages be implemented with immediate effect. Let's take a listen.
Moratorium for all trader money, market money, and farmer money loans be implemented with immediate effect. I have also directed that a 3-month repayment moratorium for all trader money, market money, and farmer money loans be implemented with immediate effect. I have also directed that a similar moratorium be given to all federal government-funded loans issued by the Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, and the Nigerian Export-Import Bank. For on-lending facilities using capital from international and multilateral development partners, I have directed our development financial institutions to engage these development partners and negotiate concessions to ease the pains of the borrowers. For the most vulnerable in our society, I have directed that the conditional cash transfers for the next 2 months be paid immediately. Our internally displaced persons will also receive 2 months of food rations in the coming weeks. We also call on all Nigerians to take personal responsibility to support those who are vulnerable within their communities, helping them with whatever they may need. As we all pray for the best possible outcome, we shall continue planning for all eventualities.
President of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari. Now, let's get a reaction to the president's statement, and I'll be talking to a partner with BlueFX Nigeria, Uchenna Minis, who's here in the studio with me. Good morning, and thanks for coming on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, what's your reaction to the president's speech?
I think should I say good step in the right direction. I think for once we've just started to be proactive, and the very important thing when it comes to trying to mitigate this risk as regards to the coronavirus outbreak is to front run it. And although it's better late than never, I welcome this development as a good way to kick off.
All right. Now, the president has directed that a 3-month payment of moratorium for all trader money, market money, farmer money loans be implemented. What sort of impact do you see this having on the informal sector given this lockdown?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of gray area when it comes to the informal sector. We don't have the adequate data to actually track things, but we can say in a way that could sort of elevate the pains we expect consumers to feel in the near term, and that would give that relief pressure when it comes to paying back this debts. But yeah, we welcome that as a good development, really.
So talking about data, you just mentioned not having enough database. So how would the government go about these disbursements?
It's a stretch, really. And if you try to compare side by side to other markets or other economies where they are trying to put out helicopter money and trying to put out all this aid, you can see that there are actual metrics to track down people, understand what they are doing by time. But we don't have any of these things, and the infrastructure needs to be in place. I don't think that has been thought about yet, rather than compared to even getting to be implemented. So there's a lot of things that needs to be done in that regard. We have a lot of individuals in that informal space, and we can tell that that's a significant part of Nigerian, should I say, gross national product, really.
But how much do you see the conditional cash transfer payment for 2 months contributing to the vulnerables in the society this period?
It's in a way that should help, because you need to understand that a major part of an economy is basically the business and investor sentiment coming from consumers, should I say, spending too. So if you can have that in that way, that in itself would elevate pressure, try to calm down nerves, and people getting to be overtly, should I say, concerned given the lockdown. Because if you think about it, when it comes to the informal sector, they are sort of structured around to their day-to-day activities. So, and you're telling them to sit down at home for 14-day period, that in itself will weigh in. So things like this will sort of just calm the nerves and keep people at bay.
Now, the president also directed that a similar moratorium of 3 months be given to federal government-funded facilities, and of course asked for engagement over the possibility of securing concessions from Nigeria's obligations to multilateral development financial institutions. Now, how far can this move go in calming the nerves of the private sector locally, and of course in cushioning the effects of debt burden on the nation?
Yeah, so that should be sort of an effective way to calm the nerves of this, should I say, sector and corporations. But very importantly, it is the ripple effect down to the customer base. So we don't want a situation where this relief or this measures are actually just, should I say, concentrated in that space and not rippled down to the consumer, because that is really the grand plan, to allow the consumers to have things easier and continue to actually spend, have things start to wind down.
Now, let's talk about the effect of the lockdown now, which begins tonight in Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT. How much impact will this have on Nigeria's economy after all this is over?
Bisha, I will need to correct you on that, because I think our focus right now is to actually contain the pandemic, right? Whatever economic impact would have to bear that pain. It is a short-term pain for the greater long-term gain. And it's very important that people need to understand that this has to be done. We've seen countries that have taken that aggressive measure, this drastic measure, and now they've flattened the curve of their infection cases, and you can see them looking to go back to the economy as it should be. But you don't try to want to eat your cake and have it when it comes to such deadly, should I say, pandemic like this. You have to really take that pain, shut down whatever economic impact it is. It would actually hit us. But in the long term, it's things that we would get to have that V-shaped recovery if things are checked early enough.
Of course, there have been several reactions to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the IMF has been active lately talking about the effects on global economies, and it's saying that it expects developing economies to be hard hit by a combination of health crisis, a sudden reversal of capital flows, and for some, a possible sharp drop in commodity prices. As an analyst, what would you say about this?
It's the fact. It's the fact. We can see oil already trading, or got to the $19 per mark, and sort of trading around that region now. People like us, Nigeria, that's overtly dependent on oil prices, we're getting hit. We can also see rating agencies kind of downgrading our rating as regards to, and that would affect investor sentiment. And we have that foreign investment coming into the space, and that will be also dwindled. So IMF is actually looking to front-run that risk, saying that the developing markets, the emerging frontier markets, will get hit significantly, because if you think about it, there are no structures to sort of mitigate such scope of downside risk. And they are looking to relax some of their measures to allow debts and also lending facilities to this space to sort of help cushion the effect.
But if we take the advice of the IMF now on a case-by-case basis, for instance, how will this advocacy align with Nigeria?
For us, very importantly, as you can see, you can all start seeing the effect. You can see the naira devaluation by the CBN a week ago, and that in itself, we the pressure that we're getting for the Saudi and Russia war, price war, we're expecting that to continue to weigh on oil prices, and we don't know how much this will continue to hit. So we need all the help we can get when it comes to external lending for institutions, and that in itself would sort of create a bit of comfort and provide that cushion for Nigeria in itself and in its economy.
So you just talked about the naira adjustments by the CBN now to the FX markets. Now, has that really solved any problems for Nigeria in this regard, and perhaps limiting the currency pressures?
It got to the point. I remember 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, there was that circular saying that the CBN was not trying to devalue naira, that the things are being kept in check. There are enough tools to fight it, but you get to realize that for us to be able to keep naira at a particular level, we need the foreign flow of FX, right? And that we have from the oil sales, and we also have that from FPIs and FDIs. So if the investors are not looking to push money down here, given some sort of this risk with coronavirus and oil prices continue to dwindle, that in itself put us in a place of not so good, should I say, FX risk. So we'll continue to see that downside pressure in that space.
Well, do you think that this adjustment is sufficient to actually see Nigeria through this pandemic?
For me, I think the risk is still more to the downside. I think the risk is still more to the downside. Until we get the demand shock and the supply shock in this regards sort of stabilize or cushion out, we'll continue to see prices devalue and naira trading lower.
Now, one other thing that the IMF talked about last weekend is that global output contracting, or seeing global output contract in 2020 and leading to a recession. What are the risk mitigants to employ?
It's basically what we've been talking about, really. The CBN pushing out targeted measures in terms of private sector, the real sector, also corporations, and also trying to elevate risk for the consumer. Also, the fiscal policies that the government, the administration is pushing out. All of these things are things that they are just going to be sort of in the background, not really kick on in terms of their positivity until we get this broad risk of the coronavirus sort of peak and is dwindling. So we start to see investors, business, and economic sentiment start to pick up in that V-shaped recovery. But we need to get this coronavirus out of the way.
And one other thing that the fund, the IMF, is advocating is debt relief from bilateral creditors, of course, to suspend debt payments from IDA countries, and that includes Nigeria. Now, tell us the countries in reference and your expectations from such countries.
When it comes to the debt relief, it comes to the point where, with the IMF trying to give you that relief, it's giving that point where the countries can have that leeway to continue to have that reasonable cash flow and continue to push down the economy to help the V-shaped recovery at the end of the day. So in itself, the IMF understands the risk that the developing markets and frontier markets are facing, and that's why they're trying to provide all of these relief packages for countries that need it the most.
All right, Eugenia, let's bear it in mind that several of these countries now, in fact, are experiencing worse than the developing countries in the area of public health, of course, given the effects of COVID-19. Now, how confident are you that countries such as the advanced markets will heed this advice at this time?
So when you say hit the market, so can you think that again? I'm not exactly sure what you're doing.
No, I was asking that the fund is advocating a debt relief from creditors, because of the COVID-19, and several of these countries are experiencing worse than the developing countries. So how confident that you think that these advanced markets can scale through even with the debt relief?
Oh, okay, right. So it comes to the point whereby we now need to ask the questions that there are things that when it comes to politicizing what needs to be done, and that's what we're seeing in some advanced market, when people are thinking that they don't need to exactly shut down the economy so that they don't hit the financial market and trying to eat their cake and have it. And that's what we're seeing with all these economies that are trying to not social distance or isolate and thinking that they can go about their business activity at the same time trying to, should I say, partially isolate isolate. That can work because we can see how fast the virus can to infect people, and it's very important that it has to be shut down, it has to be locked down, there have to be a quarantine in place, there has to be the isolation, because the very important part is not overwhelming the medical facilities, not exactly how fatal the virus outbreak is. It's more like you have so many people needing the same type of, should I say, intense care, and you need to be able to provide that, and that's what leads to the death. That's what we're seeing in Italy, Spain, and some other regions that have not really taken the time to flatten their curve early enough. And the way it's looking now, the US might be in that mix because there is that anticipation, that forecast that the US might get to about 300 to 500 cases in the next 2 weeks. And the medical facilities are already getting overwhelmed. And also, very importantly, the health professionals are getting sick. So this is the point where we're getting to. You don't want to overwhelm the guys that will be providing the care. You don't want to overwhelm the facilities that will be doing that. And that is why you need to flatten the curve early enough. And that's what we're seeing in these advanced economies, really.
Now, the IMF has also made some changes to its catastrophe containment and relief trust now. It's allowing all members countries with per capita income below the World Bank's operational threshold for concessional supports now to qualify for debt service relief for up to 2 years. Now, how well do you actually see countries subscribing to this fund, especially from Africa?
I think everybody should jump on that because it's more like the IMF saying that, well, we are not really looking at that minimal requirement for you to get into the space. We can allow you come in. It is more like we're giving you that optionality for you to plug in and help, because this is an unprecedented risk. And I think the IMF has really stepped up in trying to mitigate risk for actual member countries, really. Yeah, so I think, yeah, African countries and countries that are most exposed to this should be actually put in that space to jump on this wagon.
Now, we've also seen responses from the AFDB and Flexim Bank. How would you describe their interventions to this COVID-19?
See, I think what it is now is everybody needs to jump on board, really. It's not a risk that we are exactly sure. People have compared this to the Spanish flu to the 1918 period of just around World War I. But what is different between now and then is that the world is sort of now globalized compared to that time. So if countries are getting hit like China and the USA, you best believe that countries in the developed markets, frontier markets will get hit too. So right now, every institution that is a major stakeholder when it comes to globalization is trying to help and elevate this risk because it's unprecedented. Yeah.
Okay, but with all these interventions coming from these institutions now, what sort of disruptions will it bring to plans such as the AFCTA, which is scheduled for takeoff in June?
Everything needs to be on hold now. You see, everything needs to be on hold now. It's very important that we're getting to see a risk that no one really planned for. So whatever it is that everybody planned to do for this year, when it concerns, should I say, investment sentiments and business sentiment, everything needs to be kept on hold on the back burner right now. Let's sort out this coronavirus pandemic. Let's contain it. Let's flatten the curve. Then we can go back and revisit where we stopped. That's really what's important now.
And of course, the pandemic will be over, and I'm sure we all can't wait to see all this blow over. But how long do you think it will take to recover from all the damage done by this pandemic?
If we want to put a number to it, I would want to say 18 months to 2 years. But very importantly, it is not recovering or getting to where the economy has stopped or where it was before the pandemic hit. It's more like seeing that healthiness in the recovery, the V-shaped recovery, really. It is not, we're not expecting that to be, we're not saying that, oh, we expect everything to go back after the pandemic has been contained. We're saying that, well, we want activities to pick up at the pace that is organic and necessary. And that's really what we're looking at. But that has to be done after the pandemic has been controlled.
But how well do you see Nigeria being positioned to be able to recover from this?
It's very important that as much as we are starting to take this mitigation efforts seriously by locking down, the stakeholders in the space, the CBN and the fiscal authorities also are trying to position themselves in an effective way, an efficient manner to pick up things when things start to elevate when it comes to the virus. So I expect Nigeria to pick up because oil prices are extremely cheap. So I know I'm pretty sure Saudi and Russia would not allow price go to 5 or 2 or 0. So at some point, they're going to sit down on the table and say, well, this is beyond us. Let's really settle this out. And I think at that point, when oil price gets that discount value, investors are going to pour into riskier assets, and that way it will help propagate growth in our country.
We hope to see all that happen. A partner with BlueFX Nigeria, Uche Naminis, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.